Welcome to Resilient Minds 365, where we discuss the resilient stories of entrepreneurs, professionals, and students with mental illnesses to encourage you to strive, thrive, and live in abundance. I'm your host, Cleone Crawford. Welcome back to another episode of Resilient Minds 365, where we discuss the resilient stories of entrepreneurs, professionals, and students with mental illnesses to encourage you to strive, thrive, and live in abundance. I'm your host, Cleone Crawford. Well, guys, we're back and we have a wonderful guest with us today. Today, our guest, her name is Epiphany Jordan. I love the name Epiphany. Totally.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So who is Epiphany Jordan? Well, Epiphany Jordan, MPH, CPH, is on a mission to rebrand human touch. Prior to the pandemic, she ran the Austin, Texas-based hands-on touch business, Karuna Sessions, a ritual of human connection that provided immersive touch therapy. She is the author of Somebody Hold Me, the Single Person's Guide to Nurturing Human Touch, and spoke about using human touch to solve loneliness at South by Southwest. During the pandemic, she returned to school at the University of South Florida, where she received her master's in public health in 2023. She also studied public health, social marketing, and became certified as a health and wellness coach. When she applied for her graduate school, she said in her statement of purpose that she wanted to rebrand human touch and did a research project around that concept for one of her classes. Her professional aspiration is to start a conversation about how our current ideas around human touch are leaving many people lonely and isolated, and how we could shift our thinking to make it more accessible and inclusive. So with that said, I now present to you Epiphany Jordan. Epiphany, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Cleone. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I'm really intrigued about your thesis, your business, what you do, how you got started. Tell me a bit more about this personal touch brand that you have. I'm interested.
Oh, rebranding human touch. So a brand is it's a marketing term, but it's really about how somebody views their own business, their own brand, but it's also about how consumers view it as well. And when my teacher came to me and she's like, okay, you said you want to rebrand human touch, so let's do that. So she had me look at a bunch of different branding frameworks, and what I decided on working on was around storytelling and brand archetypes. And so I did a bunch of qualitative research. I interviewed 8 single heterosexual middle-aged women about their own experiences and perceptions of touch, both personally and how we as a culture view it. And what I did was I created 3 different stories that gave different ideas about how people could get their touch needs met, to kind of see what resonated with them and what they liked. And from there, I was able to kind of distill it down into there's 3 current archetypal ways of how we view touch. And then I looked at 4 different brand archetypes of how we might be able to shift our thinking to think about it so that more people could get it.
Cool. So what you do right now as a profession, I guess you are a touch therapist?
I'm not at the moment. I stopped doing it during the pandemic because, we were very up close and personal with people. The way that the business worked, it was a lot of people would say that we were professional cuddlers, but it was a little bit different than that because it was always done with two people. So you would come in and we would bless you and wash your feet and ask you to meditate, and then change into kind of ritual garments. And we would talk about boundaries and what you did or didn't want. And then we would ask the person to lay on the bed, and the two of us would do very light platonic touch on them. A lot of people were like, wow, I've never had anybody touch me like this. And the idea is to feel really safe because it's not going anywhere sexual. So you can just relax into this idea of being cared for through touch. And after we did the light touch on them, we would have the client lay on their side and we would hold them in between us. And it kind of mimicked the feeling of being held by your mother as an infant, because, regardless of whether you had that or not as a child, that's how our culture thinks about you, or that's how your body knows that it's safe and that you're cared for and that you're loved, and nobody's going to hurt you. And I think that our nervous systems are wired for that. So when we got done, people were kind of a puddle on the bed. A lot of times people would fall asleep, and then we would leave them to rest for a few minutes so that their body could kind of integrate that, like in yoga when you do shavasana at the end, where it's like you let all the relaxation and stretching kind of sink into your body so that your muscle memory gets that. And then we would have them change back into their regular clothes and sit on the couch with us for a few minutes and have tea and snacks, and then we would send them on their way.
Cool. That sounds interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's nice. And the thing about it is a lot of our culture really revolves around the idea, one of the brand archetypes is touch as lover, that you're going to have a partner that's going to meet all of your touch needs. And so doing it in a way where you have two practitioners and one client changes that dynamic. So it doesn't really feel like it's going to be a sexual experience, but more like you're a king or a queen and you're being waited on hand and foot by these two women who are taking care of you. And so it's a really nice, really relaxing way to just kind of allow yourself to be safe and know what it feels like to be held by other humans in a way that isn't leading to something else. That was something that I heard a lot about from the women that I interviewed of, sometimes I just wanted a hug, but my ex-husband or my ex-boyfriend would only go in to hug me if they were trying to initiate sex.
Right.
So this idea of touch as lover hurts people in a couple different ways. It hurts single people because if you're single, you don't have any access to that. I mean, maybe your friends give you a hug, hello, or goodbye when you see them, but it's also, in couples that are romantically involved, if they think that the only reason that you should touch each other is when you're going to have sex, then we don't have touch for comfort or relaxation or respite or, like getting our nervous systems to calm back down. And again, this is how humans take care of their young. And it's also the way that, we started our species, or, even up to about 100 years ago, right? It's like you live in Canada. If you had lived there before the advent of electricity, your entire family would have been sleeping in one bed together to keep from freezing to death in the winter. We've always depended on touch for safety and warmth, and now we don't have to have that, and so it's become very scarce.
Okay, makes sense. So you mentioned that this is something that you were doing before the pandemic. So Correct. What are you doing now?
What am I doing now? I just graduated from graduate school last month. Yeah, in August. Yeah, it was pretty cool. I didn't know anything about public health. I kind of had a public health mindset before I started. So what I'm planning to do right now, I'm setting up consulting business for social marketing. Social marketing is actually something that's big in Canada. It's people hear it and they think social media, and it's not really that. It's a public health practice that utilizes commercial marketing techniques to create behavioral interventions. So like the project I'm working on at the moment is around getting people living with HIV to sign up for a study to help them quit smoking.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's like I segmented the market to try and figure out what group of people would be most likely to sign up, and then I've been interviewing them. A lot of times with public health initiatives, you have a bunch of people sitting in a room going, oh, I think we should tell them this and this and this, and then when when nobody does what they want them to, they're like, well, why not? And it's like, well, you didn't talk to the people that you were trying to help and find out what's important to them. What are their barriers? It's like, everybody knows that they shouldn't smoke, that they should quit smoking, but it's complicated, right? It's like
Right.
people smoke for a lot of different reasons, and if quitting was easy, then everybody would quit. So I'm going to be doing more of that, and then working on getting this idea about rebranding Human Touch out into the world, and trying to help people figure out ways to get more touch in their lives, because there's definitely a lot of touch-starved people out there.
That's really cool. Like I really like that, where you're able to give that human touch to people, because where it doesn't lead to sex,
Right.
so many people are just longing just for that physical touch, because like I know it's very therapeutic. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very cool. Very cool. I really like that. I really like that. All right.
Thanks.
So with that said, we're gonna move into the mental health piece of this interview.
Okay, that sounds great.
All right. So my question is, what is your mental health diagnosis and when were you diagnosed?
I think I was probably diagnosed with depression when I was a teenager. I struggled with it for most of my life. I don't, I think I managed to heal it in a pretty unusual way, but yeah, I mean, it was pretty rough for quite a while.
Okay. All right. And my next question is, so tell us about your mental health story of resilience. What did you have to go through? How did you overcome? And just walk us through that chronological period of how you were able to be resilient despite your illness of depression from your
Okay.
teenage.
So I had a therapist tell me, this was probably about 20 years ago, that they thought that maybe I had borderline personality disorder as well. And I never had an official diagnosis of that, but my behavior was certainly that way. And like I spent a lot of time being depressed, but like my depression would really kind of surface around breakups. If I was dating somebody and then the relationship ended, and I was classic borderline stuff, right? Like calling the person 50 times a day or something, and just really unable to let go. So it was actually almost exactly 20 years ago, I started kind of trying to feel into this. I was like, what's going on here? Why is this, relationship thing so hard for me? Why am I always attracted to emotionally unavailable men? Because I was like, my parents are still married, and I've had a pretty middle class lifestyle. Neither of them were addicts, or I wasn't abused as a child. There was probably there was definitely some yelling and some emotional abuse, but like I was like, where did this come from? And I ended up, it was in 2003, so almost exactly 20 years ago. A friend had given me some salvia, which is it's an herb that you can smoke that kind of gives you visions. So I smoke it. I'm with a friend, who's kind of babysitting me. and I'm going through and I'm having this vision, and in the vision I'm a young Native American girl and with my mother and my father, and I totally loved my father. And then the scene switches and I'm a little bit older and my father is on his horse and he's going off into battle. And then I see, it's like the scene switches again. I'm a little bit older. My father hasn't come back. My mother's very devastated about it. And she loves me, but I remind her of her partner who's now dead. And then the scene switches, I'm a little bit older again, and he ends up coming back, and he's like super traumatized, like this shell shocked, I think they call it, where he's just been traumatized by war. And so I'm, switches a little bit older and he's just sitting by the fire and I'm trying to heal him. I'm like trying to take all of his pain and his sorrow out, and it didn't work. And then I'm older again and I'm very isolated. I can't like be around my tribe and stuff. So I switches again and I end up going off and I'm living by myself in the woods, and I'm just talking to the animals. And then I decide that I'm going to go back and confront him. So the next scene, I'm like going back and confronting him again. So, and that's kind of when I come back out of my vision. So I'm telling my mother this story, and she's like, well, so what is it, what's this thing about, dad going off to war? And my father was raised in South Africa. So I was like, maybe it was his battle with apartheid. And she remembered, she had like completely forgotten about this, but about 5 months after I was born, my father ended up he was an English major who was getting his PhD in English, and he had the opportunity to go to England for the 500th anniversary of Shakespeare's birth. So I'm pre-verbal. So all I know is that this person that I totally loved is now gone. Mm-hmm. And when she said that, she had forgotten about that this had happened. I was like, oh my God, Mom, that's it. So I recognized this as like the place where, I had gotten my heart broken for the first time. And it was crazy because I had met somebody that I had like fallen for really hard. And he literally left the country without telling me. Like it was, I'm like, wow, okay, so I'm really replicating this pattern. So I ended up, I was like, okay, it was like I started feeling this pain that I had kind of suppressed, and it was like rising to the surface. And so I asked a friend of mine who was a priestess to do a shamanic soul retrieval, which is where the priestess kind of stays connected to you, and then they go into the underworld to, get whatever part of your soul is back. So she had, like when my father had left in her vision, he had taken a piece of my heart. So she comes back and like puts this piece of my heart back in me. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is now I'm healed. So it's like, no, okay, all of a sudden there's like more of my heart to be hurting, right? And so a couple days later, I was getting a massage from somebody that I knew who was a really incredible massage therapist. And he literally just kind of held me while I was able to let go of that pain. And it was so transformational. I had friends coming up to me and they're like, what's going on with you? You seem different. You're very, and I felt like I was able to be more whole and be in the present moment. And a few months after that, I actually ended up dating a man that I married. And so it really shifted things around for me. And I've definitely had I've been through some painful experiences, and I've had sadness and grief and loss, but I don't think I've ever been 100% fully depressed since I did that work, and that's been about 20 years. So it's been nice.
That's good. So what did you have to do to overcome or bounce back from your low points? List all the resources. I know you did talk about the meeting with the priestess. That
Yeah.
helped you a lot. Was there anything else that helped you to balance?
Yeah. One of the things that I've done a lot of over the past 10 years is microdosing. I've done it on and off, microdosing LSD or psilocybin. It's when you take a very tiny perceptual amount, so you're not taking it to get high. So you take like you don't even feel altered, but you do it like once every 3 days for a few months, and it's really kind of helped my brain to just kind of tweak around a little bit to be more even keel. It's like there's a lot of things I don't take personally so much anymore. I'm generally just kind of in a good mood and happy most of the time. I maybe it helped me when I was feeling depressed, but I didn't really start doing it until after I had been through my heavy depression. But I will say that I've known a lot of people who've tried it, who have been dealing with some pretty heavy duty depression, who've said that it just makes the hugest difference for them.
Okay, cool. My next question is, so what are three things you wish you had available when you were at your lowest point?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I would say that the first thing that I wish that I had had available was definitely more touch. I mean, I can remember just, being devastated by a breakup and, wishing that somebody would just kind of hold me while I cried. It's hard when when you're going through a breakup and that person is your support and your companion, and all of a sudden you can't go to them again. um More community.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like, for me, like, I have a very strange family and family story, and I grew up in a very, like, very nuclear family. It was me and my brother and my parents. My father had hundreds of relatives in South Africa that I didn't know, so I didn't know any of my aunts and uncles. And then my mother was was an only child, so she had some aunts and uncles who lived in Los Angeles, but like my grandparents left the country when I was about 7 years old, so I didn't have extended family. I didn't have a weird aunt, like I'm a weird aunt right now for my niece. And, it was like, I wish that I had had somebody like that around me, who could give me advice and, be like, hey, this is, you're going to make it through, and, you got to take a longer view or whatever. Um, and then I really wish that I had had more of a practice, or somebody to kind of get me out and move my body a little bit more, because I think that trauma really tends to settle in when you don't move around a lot. It
Right.
makes it, I think it makes it a lot easier to process things. It doesn't solve it or heal it or resolve it 100%, but just to, I mean, even to put you more in your body so that you can feel more to get rid of it.
Okay, cool. And so, what words of hope can you give to our listeners? What would you tell someone that's been where you've been?
I would say that if possible, the best thing to do is to try and take a long view, which I know is a really hard thing when you're depressed, because it's like all your problems are right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I've definitely been through periods of depression or stress, going through bad experiences, and it's like, or having a disagreement with somebody that's hurtful that you take personally. To be able to go, is this going to matter a week from now? Is this going to matter a month from now? Is this going to matter a year from now? Is this going to matter 5 years from now? So I think it's somewhat stoic, or trying. Something that also has been really helpful for me a lot is trying to open kind of a visualization meditation connection with like an older self, like somebody who's 10 or 20 years, 30 years older than me, who's older and wiser, who can kind of give me advice from the future. I think can be really helpful, because sometimes you get really surprising answers, and also to try and, instead of like trying to depress or suppress things, to try and be open to learning whatever it is that it has to teach you. I believe that sometimes, if we're lucky, that our wounds can become our medicine and also our gift that we have to offer the world.
Yes, I like that. Our wounds can be our medicine and gift that we have to offer the world. I like that. I like
Yeah.
that. Definitely, definitely. So now we're going to take a little switch in the interview.
Okay.
This part is about music therapy. As you can see behind me, there is a book that says The Music of My Life. And it's about my journey with bipolar and music therapy. So my question to you is, what type of music do you like?
Oh, I like a lot of different types of music, but I mean, if you had to like pigeonhole me into one, it would probably be rock and roll, just from when I grew up and what I was listening to. Strangely, I was like just the perfect age for when punk rock was starting. I was about 13 or 14, but I missed the boat on that for some reason. But yeah, give me some good guitars and
Cool, cool. Okay. So if you were to think of a song that best describes your journey, what would it be and why?
hmm. Well, I think the answer that I gave you, I did a cheat and went for a whole album instead of just a single song. That album was Healing by Todd Rundgren, because it's kind of a concept album that goes through different phases of healing and feeling bad. Um, Boy, if I had to pick a single song, probably the Jeff Buckley version of Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen.
Hmm.
It's so beautiful and vulnerable, and I just, his voice and the lyrics, and it's a really incredible piece of music. It's actually, I went through a trauma around sound, and that was the album, the Jeff Buckley album Grace. That was like kind of the first piece of music that I was able to listen to again, because for a long time I couldn't, I was like, I didn't want any sort of sound because it had been so painful for me. So
Right. Okay.
yeah.
Really cool, different selections. That's really cool. And those selections, would you consider them rock and roll?
Yeah, both of them for sure.
Okay, cool, cool. So my last question for you is, how can we stay in touch with you? What are your social media handles?
Okay. Hang on, I have to think about it for a second. On Instagram, my thing is somebody underscore hold underscore me. And I haven't been posting very much, but I post different thoughts that I have around the concept of human touch. I mean, it's such a big topic, and there's so many different factors to it that people don't often think about. On Facebook, I have a web page for Karuna Sessions, and I have another one for the book For Somebody Hold Me. And I haven't kept up with those too much either, because I plead grad school. That's my excuse for everything. Uh,
Yeah.
I often post articles that I find that talk about touch, or uh, TED Talks that I find, or different research, people's first person experiences around touch hunger. And then my website, where I've kind of consolidated my work both with the book and the hands-on touch services, nurturinghumantouch.com.
Cool.
And people, if they're interested in the book, they can find it. It's on Amazon and Audible. And what's the big bookstore that y'all have up in Canada?
Indigo. Or Barnes and Noble.
No, it's
Chapters. Chapters.
Yes, I think yeah, I'm on their website as well.
Okay.
So yeah, I can be found most places with that. So
cool. I love it. Well, Epiphany, it's been a great having you and you sharing your story. And I really thought that learning about touch therapy was definitely very interesting.
Yeah, it's
like I know with the love languages, the 5 love languages, physical touch is a very important one, and sometimes we don't understand how important it is to get that energy, into our lives, that physical touch. So
yeah. It's human connection. I mean, it at its most basic level. And yeah, and it doesn't even have to be like laying down in bed and cuddling with somebody. It can be as simple as, hey, I had a bad day, would you mind holding my hand while I'm talking about this? It's like a little touch really goes a long way, and it's so powerful for people. I mean, if it's touch that you want and that you're happy to receive, the thing that people say so much is, oh my God, that feels so good. It's like, they're just like, wow, I had no idea, because it's like we're so separate from it, right?
Okay, cool. So we are just going to end this show, but then to all you resilient minds out there, until next time, please subscribe to us on all platforms, and don't forget to rate the show and leave a review for us on Apple Podcasts. Also, join the community of resilient minds and sign up for our monthly newsletter at cleonicrawford.com. Be sure to grab a copy of my book, The Music of My Life, on all Amazon marketplaces to get to know me better. And if you can think of one person that will receive value from today's show or connect with Epiphany's testimonial, please share it with them. And feel free to take a screenshot of this week's episode of the podcast and tag us on Instagram. You can tag myself at Only Cleone or Resilient Minds 365, and today's guest at somebody_hold_me. And remember, mental health is not a death sentence. Despite your illness, you can strive, thrive, and live a life of abundance. Until next time, I'm Cleone Crawford, and I'm signing off.